This segment is brought to you in part by the Canadian Historical Arms Society, owners of the Genesee Range, the premier recreational sport and training facility in Western Canada. See us online at historical-arms.com.
The Quiet Professional, a podcast about law enforcement, security, justice, and politics. We are digging deeper on the issues and going where the information takes us with access to experts and authorities. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome back. Nathan Romas with you. Today we got some great topics on here, probably the closest to what I've been doing for the last 6.5 years in my job. We're going to be doing a deep dive into the world of organized crime. We're going to have a few critiques in there for law enforcement, and we'll probably get into the politics of it all. But I'm super excited. I've got Margarito J. Flores Jr. here. He goes by Jay. His story is an account of transformation. Jay and his twin brother were steeped in the narcotics business, guided by their father into a life of crime that would see them ascend to significant heights within the Chicago drug market and establishing a pivotal drug network for the Sinaloa cartel across North America. They were central to moving over $3 billion in bulk U.S. currency back to Mexico. I couldn't even imagine what $3 billion looks like. Jay's journey involved direct dealings with most notorious figures of the Sinaloa cartel leadership, including Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, Ismael El Mayo Zambada, and their heirs. On the path of redemption, Jay now advises law enforcement and government on effective strategies and legislation to combat drug trafficking. He even works to promote accurate portrayals of drug trafficking in Hollywood and media to correct public misconceptions, offering a more nuanced understanding of the issues involved. Super cool. I hope we get to talk about that too by the end. So welcome, Jay.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Nathan. It's been a pleasure. We spoke a little bit prior, but I was excited about this, especially with you being from Canada.
Yeah.
And so much conversation going on with Canada today that I hope that could be beneficial to all your listeners as well.
Yeah, well, and you know what, we were talking offline as well about we got to get you up here to speak to law enforcement. So we'll plug that right at the beginning. If any law enforcement are listening to this from any of the conferences, you got to check out Jay's work. He's on LinkedIn. He's got a website. We'll get all that up in the episode description later. But yeah, I'm happy to get you on here and talk about some of these topics. So
thank you for the privilege.
I did want to just kind of get into your story just a little bit. People can see a lot of this on your website, but I'm just wondering, what was it like getting into this lifestyle? Because it says that your father had something to do with that. And then if you could talk a little bit about on the back end of it, how you got out of this lifestyle.
Well, how many weeks do we have? No. I'm practicing. I'm very detailed, so sometimes I could get too much in detail. But just to summarize it, I was born. I have an identical twin brother. I was born in Chicago, Illinois, and my father was actually in prison when I was. Me and my brother were born for selling 11 pounds of black tar heroin to an undercover informant. So before I was born, my father was a significant heroin trafficker in California, Chicago, and that's what he did for a living, along with being a coyote at one time. I don't remember what it was like being without my father, from the age of, from when I was born. But he happened to be released he was released early due to good conduct. So he served around 7 and something years out of a 10-year sentence.
Okay.
He came home, and him being, from central Mexico and being like a man's man, it was important to him, I guess, to try to remake all those years that he was missing, especially with his younger boys. I do believe that, for a while, me and my brother being young, we were being twins. I felt like he wanted, to really take time to work on us, especially because he was missing for so much part of our lives. And, I always say that I don't remember not having a father. I don't remember his presence not being there because we got to visit him in prison. And I do remember what it was like from the first day he got home, just because, our home was like, we had, there's a total of 7 siblings, right? Including
Okay.
myself, 3 older sisters, my twin brother and 2 older brothers. And we're multi-generational. So I have an older sister who's 20 years my senior, and then my older brothers are 15 and 13 years older than me.
Wow.
And that big age gap, my youngest, the younger one after before us was 7 years older than us.
Oh,
And
geez.
so they
Okay.
took a part, raising us, and and to me, I felt like I never knew that there was like missing parts of my life. I always, my mom, I did such a great job, including, you know, my siblings and helping raising us up to that point. But now my father coming home, it was like things were going to change. Him being a man's man and seeing things a totally different way.
And how old would you have been when he came back?
I was around 7 and a half.
Okay.
Um, and to us, it was like, us being happy. I think knowing that now we had our father home, but at the same time, it came with so many chores, and our life changed. We
Hmm.
went now. My father was gonna, come put his rule of power into the house, and what he felt how we should have been raised was going to be a big topic in our home. And I believe that he wanted us, in his mind, he was going to teach us how to be men, and that came along with always having us by his side. And um, there was going to be things that he was going to teach us or show us that I don't think um, was planned. Like I don't. It was. I think it was a form of ignorance where, not long after he came home, he got back into what he was good at doing,
Hmm.
uh, and how he provided. And him being Mexican, from Central Mexico, where he grew up very poor, like providing for the family was like so essential for him. Was so like the most important thing. And him coming home to house falling apart and not the way of life he was used to, especially seeing my mom work 2 jobs, and we're in poverty, right? We're getting government assistance and going to soup kitchens and stuff like that. That really affected him, and it wasn't long before he planned our first trip to Mexico.
Mm.
And he was going to start teaching us the drug trade. um I don't think it was something that he was, consider like, well, I'm going to teach my sons the drug trade, and they're going to become some of the most significant drug traffickers. And then
Yeah.
I don't think it was that, and I don't think nothing about my life was ever planned or predicted in any way. I think it was just something that was going to transpire and come to be. Um, but we made our first trip uh, across the border with a car full of drugs before we were 8,
Wow.
and we're going to learn the drug trade from Mexico, from the Mexican side. And at that time, it was marijuana that my father was actually trafficking. And he's gonna start teaching us like the business, but not in a way where, like I said, like drug trafficking 101. It was more of like where he was teaching us how to be men. What he believed, what was important to be a man, like morals, principles, respect. And at the same time, we're going on these trips with him, and my father was very intelligent. He's teaching us the highway system. There's no, back then there's no phones, there's no
Yeah.
tablets. It's, my father, me, my twin brother, my mom, and my father on the road. We entertain each other. And the way he entertained us was educating us with, things that he knew about the United States, what each state was known for, intersections and just things that were going to come to help my brother and I later on
Hmm.
in our own line of work, I guess. But I think that, I always point out that what I believe helped my brother and I more than anything was going to be those principles of what it was like, what he was teaching us how to be men, how to be respectful, not to be liars, to be men of our word,
Yeah.
and how to treat others. And I think those were the core values that made my brother and I successful later on in the drug trade.
Maybe I'll add in there too, just having talked to a lot of informants and people who've been at decent levels involved in the drug trade and some other things. And that's honestly one of the things that's probably kept a lot of them alive is just saying, being the nice guy and actually controlling your temper, which a lot of them can't. Like, I guess that's usually a problem with a bunch of them. But if you can just be on an even keel and you help people and, like you said, respectful and you keep your word and all those things, you could be successful in any part of life, including on that side of it. So,
Absolutely. You know what? Absolutely. There's a big difference between what's being, perceived, especially today in the culture today, through social media, through, all these different forms that, especially through movies and through Hollywood. It's one of the things, one of the reasons why I got into consulting as well, because, I remember growing up, even now, everyone wanted to be Scarface, right? Everyone
yeah.
wanted to be, Tony Montana. And, and he died just like everyone else who follows that example, I guess, ends up doing or spends a lot of time in prison. Um, but I do feel like, when people look at me and my brother, we're not what people would assume to be. And the people that, if you hear a story and you don't, you're profiling, and I've heard it many times. This was the case even when I was working directly with, you know, the bosses of Sinaloa cartel was that on paper we didn't play the part, we didn't look the part. They expected us to, be that, you know, persona that I think Hollywood or even the streets put on, that you have to be this like, terrible gangster person, right? Or,
Yeah.
or a murderer or, this. And you hear the stories all the time. You hear people like that dying every day and going to prison. But I think for organized crime, I think it's always going to be those, mellow, well-tempered persons,
hmm
that have that use their intelligence more than their emotions to be successful.
Well, and that's something that actually you point out a really good thing there where uh, there is that perception that if they're going to, someone's going to see cartel in Canada, they literally think it's going to be someone with face tats, they're covered head to toe, they're going to walk a certain way, they're going to talk a certain way because it's all they've seen in movies. But it's like, no, there's guys who wear suits and they can be the nicest people and you would have no clue. They just go completely under the radar. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Like I always point out, like I don't have one tattoo on me.
yeah.
Um, I don't probably look like what many people could assume. Or especially today, you look at the Mexican drug cartels. It's one of the things I ask in all of my seminars. Like you think of Mexican cartel, you're thinking of a Sicario, you're thinking of a utility vest with grenades and a big old AK-47, something like that. And I'm like, when was the last time you arrested one of these guys?
Yeah.
Um, Perception, I think it plays a big role, but uh, as well as I think that's one of the probably um, things that helped me and my brother grow and be successful was that we're underestimated.
Yeah, 100%. And that's something we will get into a bit later when we talk about like profiling because we had some good discussion on that.
Mm.
Maybe we'll jump to also how'd you get out of this lifestyle? Was it the result of being charged, and then how do you get into consulting from there?
Yeah, so you know, going back to my father,
hmm
we started basically, our first trip across the border. We started to learn the drug trade. It was going to be the first of many trips, dozens of trips for the next 5 years. It's going to start off, him on his own. Then he's going to start working and start organizing a group of traffickers that would transport drugs from Mexico to into the United States for him. And at that time, it was just purely marijuana. And my father was going to be arrested again for another informant. And it's part of his passion of him hating informants. He blamed informants for like ruining his life. And by that time, we already had, I spent so much time going to Mexico and he'd take us out of school that, it was my second home. I had friends there, it, it's weird because in Mexico, we were looked at like, Americans,
hmm
they, they didn't fully like, consider us Mexican. And but by the time I was 12 years old, I had spent so much time there that I started to pick up those right. I guess Mexican. Um, what would you call them? Like tendencies or the
Okay.
way we talk, how
Like the
we ate.
traits.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, those traits, and they didn't see us differently. My father was all about work, and being a man, we meant hard work. So he eventually going to have a chicken farm. He's going to send us to work there, and the townspeople like they respected. They saw us, and they saw that we were like hard workers. They also knew what my father did, but that never got into the way. It was just normal. And by then, my older brother, because my father despised gang members, and my two older brothers were Lion King members and had become high ranking member of the Lion King street gang. Um, my older brother Armando had became the drug kingpin,
Mm.
and his drug was cocaine. He didn't like marijuana.
How come your dad didn't like that though? Did he see it as like it's below him or below the family or the business or
That's a great question. He despised gang members.
Hmm.
To him, it was okay if you did what you had to do to provide. And he looked at these gang members in the corners. Right, I grew up in southwest side of Chicago, little village. It was gang infested, and he would basically be like, these guys are bums, drug addicts,
Okay.
alcoholics that are wasting their life away, and they could go get a job and provide for their family. Like that's the way he seen it. Like if you're doing something illegal to provide for your family, then great. But these gang members were just, you know, gang banging. And in Chicago, I want to make clear the culture of being a gangster started in Chicago. You go back to Al Capone and in those days, the culture there is, you know, unique. It's one of a kind. It spread from Chicago to all across, the
Hmm.
United States and to the world. And
You can go on tours in Chicago for was it
yeah,
like where Capone was arrested or was like one of his favorite restaurants is at the top of some fancy building. So
yeah, they have all those tours, and I think that that's where it kind of comes from. Like, you have some of the largest street gangs and violent ones, and I will say that um, street gangs in Chicago don't. It's not doesn't money and street gangs don't go together.
mm,
Um, Usually, if you belong to a street gang, there you represent that, and that's it. And my father being in prison with these street gangs, he got a first hand experience of what it was like. So, in his point of view, they were dumbass.
yeah.
And he would tell us every chance he'd get, because they're part of the neighborhood. He'd just be like, "You dumbasses," like wasting your life away. And he comes home to my older brothers being in the gang, and he was serious. I remember him complaining to my mom over and over again, and she's like, what do I know? She came from Mexico. I thought it was part of like culture in here, and that's what kids did,
Yeah.
and uh, he ended up kicking him out not long after he came home, and that kind of propelled them into the drug trade as well.
Okay.
And my father had to get had a heads up, I guess. With all the drugs he was bringing from Mexico, he he didn't have to go far to sell them. He was selling them to his own kids, at home,
Mm.
who became his main customers. And I remember at your early age where I hear my father like argue with my brothers about prices. And my older brothers would be like, "Man, not even that we're his sons, he gives us a break." He needed his money. And um, yeah, but my older brothers, being men already, and my older brother Armando had became the neighborhood kingpin, and he went into the business of cocaine, and my father didn't like cocaine.
Mm.
He felt like it was a bad for business, that you could get arrested, and he would call it that they refer to it like as a female, like it's she'll betray you,
Yeah. Yeah.
that type of stuff. My older brother had been doing good for himself, and he basically uh, bought my father's house and remodeled it, fixed it, and he was like to us, he was like the person that raised us. When my dad was in prison. Um, he a lot of people say, well, he was like a second father to me. I'm like, no, he was like my father.
Yeah.
Um, American, right? Culturalized, and not long after, we were living in Mexico. My older brother, he always showed us nothing but like love and took care of us. And he basically called and said, "Hey, you know what? You guys miss home?" And we're like, yeah, like absolutely, we miss home. And he basically said, "Look, I'll bring you guys back home." We were 12 years old at the time. Um, I'll bring you guys back home, but you guys just gotta follow these like simple rules, like stay out the way, go to school, don't get shot, and
It's a good advice.
yeah, and he said, "I'm not gonna baby you, but I'm not gonna be like taking care of you, but I built you guys out an apartment, a two-bedroom apartment, kitchen, bathroom, and you guys could come back and you know go to school, and I'll take care of you guys." And that's what basically gonna start like our knowledge in the distribution part of the drug business, especially in the United
Okay.
States.
So it was more your older brother who started getting you into that. So your dad had like a little bit of time in there, but then it was more the brother.
So there's two things to it. There's there was the Mexican side of the business, importation, the drug trafficking side of business. My
Yeah.
father does that, but the American side of the business, distribution, and that we learned it from our brother.
Hmm.
Um, my brother was back then in the '90s. He was those kingpins, those original ones, that had, I remember, the house in our neighborhood at that time cost like, $70,000,
Hmm.
you know, and my brother would have, $300,000 worth of cars sitting parked up in front. And, and he was the one that everyone loved. That he was a real, you know, a good person. He helped everyone out, and everyone would like gravitate to him, right? He was the money man.
Hmm.
Um, and matter of fact, I always say, like, just to give you some understanding, it's like we were not, we were twins, so we were rare. So we had that type of like attention always where people would see us and they do a double take and ask us all these questions because twins were not common back then.
Yeah.
Today they're everywhere.
Yeah.
But we were also Mondo's brothers everywhere we went, where we didn't have to be picked on and no peer pressure. Uh, and because of that, there's two sides of it where all those gang members, they respected us, or maybe they didn't mess with us because who our brother was. But then on the other side, like we couldn't have any regular friends because the whole neighborhood knew who we were. So
Hmm.
no, you know, no families or parents would ever let their kids hang out with us.
Yeah.
The whole neighborhood knows.
I think when you have 300,000 in vehicles sitting in front of your $70,000 house, people start to ask questions.
Yeah, well, our house wasn't worse than that. We had the biggest house. We had that. It's
Yeah.
like everyone knows who we are.
Yeah.
And kind of same thing for Mexico. And it's something I always point out. Like who's who. Them beat cops, them patrol cops. They know who's who.
Yeah.
That was our family. You could go anywhere to those businesses today and go back to where I'm from, and they know who we were back then, and that kind of pushed us to have older friends. All of my friends were like 7 years older than me. So if I'm 12 years old, they're 18, 19 years old.
And that's how you get in real trouble.
You know what? Believe it or not, I had to mature fast.
Yeah.
For the those gang members or those people that were around my brother, it's weird because they took care of us. We couldn't get in trouble. My brother's a shot
Hmm.
caller. Like you have rules, but then my regular friends were good people. Were good, just stay away from gangs and drugs, and one of my closest friends, just retired from the police force after 29 years. So it's like, you know, they saw that we were just born into the wrong family, and they consider us to be good. Like they didn't see, we didn't have that in us. We were bad, and I say that.
So did you have many interactions with police then? Like from 12 on, was there much going on? If you weren't getting into too much trouble, did you come across law enforcement? Do you remember anything specific or any specific officers?
Well, wow, yes. This is weird. So I didn't get in no trouble on my own. Like me and my brother were not troublemakers. I didn't have my first encounter with cops, like where something's on my record was I think at 13, 14 years old because I had a lot of driving without a license. My
Oh, yeah.
older brother cars. So, I mean, they know us in the neighborhood. A cop sees us and, he would pull us over right away because they know who we are as well. But I will tell you that for most cops in the neighborhood, they knew we were not gang members.
Mhm.
They know the neighborhood. They know who the gang members were not. I won't say the majority of them, but they also knew who our family. So basically, they didn't they didn't care.
Yeah.
We were, but we didn't get in no trouble on our own. Like we're not into gangs. Something to point out that my brother and I never were into drinking or drugs. We never did drugs. Uh, so it's we're well known, especially to law enforcement, and ironically, um, I get to hear first and accounts of what it was like and how they perceived us because both me and my twin brother later we both married daughters of Chicago police officers.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
You're really tied into it now. You're on the law enforcement side now.
you know what? I would tell you, I feel like it's not gonna matter for me. They're still gonna feel a certain way, but my twin brother's father-in-law, he was a narcotics and he was a gang officer right in our district.
Mm.
S Like, I knew him since I was a kid, It's one of those neighborhoods where cops know, they know the gang members by nickname, and that's
Yeah.
their job, right?
Yeah.
So, um, that's gonna like, just growing up, it's just ironic the way things were. We're in this situation, but being around my older brother, his whole thing was like, "We're not gonna become gang members." Basically, it was like hearing a newer version of my father.
Mhm.
He kinda had the same settlement after a while. And there's some times where I could think like, "Oh my god, like, this person is really cool," or, "He seems like a good guy," like, young version of me. Then I'd hear my older brother be like, "These fucking dumbasses." And then that was like, "Wait, I'm confused." And I think that's what I started to understand the business of having associates and not everyone's your friend.
Mm.
To me,
Yeah.
that's things I'm gonna start picking up, and that time, I it was always gonna go back to who you were, who your name was, right? And even today, I think that plays a big role in any type of organization. But in Little Village at that time, my brother was a person to go see, so you had random people from Sinaloa cartel, Juarez cartel at the time, Colombians literally come knocking our door. You're Mando,
Mhm.
you're senior son, you're Margarito's son, and I have 20 kilos of cocaine. Do you help me sell them? I mean, just like that, business would come find him. This is before cell phones and social
Yeah.
media, right? It was all on a name basis, and he'd get these referrals. And back then, the Lion King Street Gang was more of the gang that considered like more respectful and did the right business. So criminal organizations, especially drug cartels at that time, look for members of Lion King to move their product. So I'm gonna, being there, I'm gonna start to see like firsthand experience. He's telling us like, you're not gonna sell drugs, you're not gonna be in a gang, but we're basically his helpers. We're his right hand man to do everything.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we would package, we would receive, count money, and uh, be around all his associates. And again, right? It's ignorance, and it's not something that he wanted, and he made it clear to us we're not going to become drug traffickers or gang members, but we're like learning everything firsthand. And eventually, he's gonna get arrested back in 1998 by the feds for a drug conspiracy. And I remember like going to visit him for the first time. He begged, like, "Look, you can go get a job."
Mm.
He had took right. He had given us everything. Like the lifestyle he had provided for my brother and I was different. He would literally spend thousands of dollars on us in clothes, and we always buy us cars, like brand new cars all the time. And he really care about our appearance and, how we looked. And, I guess it was just a reflection of him. And he was our provider for all those years. And now he was locked up and he basically said, "Hey, you know what? I have money, but not for you. Just you're gonna have to move out. You're gonna have to go and
Make your own way. Yeah.
make your own way and get a job." And he said, "But what you're not gonna do is do this." I remember him telling me that. I was like, it was not even a thought. Like I didn't belong. Like that wasn't even like I. It's like you telling me, I have to, like go play football, and I never played football. That's how I felt like.
That's interesting because I mean, this whole time, all your father figures throughout your life have been involved in that lifestyle. And I mean, I don't know what else you would really know at that time, but like, you're just kind of naturally going to have those skills and be involved with that world. Your friends are in that group. Like, where else would you go?
Because I was one of those people that perception and right that we're gonna speak about that we encounter a lot.
Yep.
I didn't even see myself as that group, and I'm gonna say this in the easiest way possible. I didn't see myself as a grimy dumbass,
Yeah. The gangbanger
you
on the
know,
street. Yeah.
gangbanger in the street, like drug addict, drug user. Like I didn't like we put all that together. I didn't see myself as that, so there's no way I could even imagine that would fit in.
Mm.
I'm not from Central Mexico with like my dad's type of virtues, right? I'm 17 at the time.
Yeah.
And then I'm not this hard gangster person that, you know, been in a gang that's gonna demand respect, especially at that time in the 90s where, you know, violence is what that's where the transition went from I think for real, where it's like you were respected for a name or like money got everyone's respect. And I want to tell you, like, I don't want to get too much off topic, but to me, about looking at the culture,
Hmm.
the people that like this I have to say this. I have to be. I changed the way I speak because it's a
Yeah. No, take it where you need to.
this right. I believe like you have some idiots that start pushing what they can't be onto the culture. Like at that time, it was like what money. F anyone with money. Forget all these guys. If you're not gangster, you're not a violent person, then we can respect you. Now everyone wants to be violent.
Yeah.
Like that. F everyone. Me. Mentality
Hmm.
that kind of started back then, and it kind of just continues to evolve. Like in the streets, the culture. I see it, especially in the young youth, you know the dumb stuff that they do that they feel like they can't work with anyone. Everyone's an op or that stupid mentality. And now, to me, as a small example, I remember it was always important for us to look our best, to have haircuts, like have clean sneakers. Right now, you look at the culture today. It's like you go and people go to restaurants in pajamas, and
Yeah.
the theme is not to get a haircut.
Yeah.
Everyone does drugs.
Yeah.
And when I was growing up, it was weird because you had the money makers didn't like. Let me tell you, you don't do drugs. You don't get high off your own supply.
Hmm. Yeah. It's changed. It's different now.
And to me, it's like who changes it? Those people that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Next, you have a bunch of the culture, young people wanting to be them, like wanting to be basically bums.
Hmm. I think I don't know, like it's if it's just laziness too, or it's like the greater culture that's out there, not just within the crime stuff, but just culture in general. Like you see people, like you're saying, you go to a nice restaurant, you'll see people wearing like their finest sweatsuit, and you're like, what the hell are you doing? Like
You know what, lazy? Like, did you try? Did you even like try to like? And you know what? That's a good thing because remember, my father. I could go to so many stories of stories of him saying hard work, hard work, hard work. For sure, hard work, not being a lazy ass.
Mhm.
It was gonna help. It's gonna be these principles that's gonna change. And it's gonna help with me and my brother later, and even in our legal activities. But even today, I think it's great. For those who don't have to really work hard. But then next thing you know, they expect it to be easy.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a problem.
So there's a few things that I'm totally against. Like whoever invented that drug dealing, or it's called or easy money,
Yeah.
they tr they truly didn't have any. I would say because that mentality makes people think that it's really easy, and that's probably I probably could go make, maybe not the same amount of money, but it'd be easier for me to do it than actually what I had to do in the drug trade.
Yeah.
But it's that mentality of people want everything easy, they don't wanna work hard, um, or just don't have it in them. And I think it also has to do us as parents. I think we always strive to, give our kids a better life, for them to not have it, as hard as we did, but also we forget to teach them those principles of what it is,
Yeah, they gotta have some hardship in their life, and they gotta strive to make some of the things happen themselves, learn from their own mistakes, right? Um, no, I totally agree on that. I'm wondering, like, so you're like 17 now, your brother's in jail, so you kind of like start going in, you're getting to adulthood here now. What gets you into like the official lifestyle that you would say like now I'm the one running things?
it wasn't planned, but the first thing was that me and my brother knew everyone, right? But we were actually approached by his source of supply, who was a distributor for the Sinaloa cartel.
Okay.
And, he arranged, 3, 4 months after my brother being arrested, he basically asked us to come meet him. And we went to meet him. And he's like, look, I need you guys' help.
Yeah.
Me and my brother, what? Like, our help for what? He like, to sell this work, that's what we call it. To sell this work, I have a lot of work. I need your help to sell it. And me and my brother looked at each other like, you asking the wrong people, believe it or not. Like, and I, there's other associates at that time that were trying to take my brother's place. I'm like, why don't you talk to this person, that person? He's like, look, they approached me, but your brother never really had nothing good to say, and I can't trust them.
Okay. Yeah.
But you guys, you got this, man. And it's like it's something I never had thought about. But he said that, and it's like I feel like we didn't know what we were doing, and we just that was enough for us to be like, oh, okay, I could try to help you.
Mhm.
And I remember him asking us like, how many kilos do we want? And we asked him for 5, and he laughed
To start.
to
You
start.
start at 5.
No, yeah, he laughed. He said, "Go home." And it's just so many mistakes, okay? Because the story's long, but so many mistakes. But he's like, "Go home. I'm gonna send you, the worker." And a couple hours later, they showed up, and our first shipment of drugs were for 30 kilos of cocaine,
Oh, wow.
and, and worth, at that time in Chicago, was worth around $550,000. Um, we're gonna have to learn a lot of things the hard way, but you know, 30 kilos eventually is gonna lead to us selling 2,500 kilos of cocaine a month. This is before we even stepped foot in Mexico.
Jeez, eh?
Now that sounds like wow, it's just you know one elevator all the way up, but no, it was a lot. There's a lot of mistakes done, a lot of suffering, a lot of things that happen
Yeah.
that I couldn't have predict. But it seemed like every time we had a hardship or a hard fall, it seemed like we always bounced back even stronger.
Mm.
And eventually, uh, one of the things that I will point out, it wasn't planned. Nothing was planned. Like, I could come in here and be like, yeah, I planned everything, and I'm a great chess player, and
Too many variables, though. Way too many variables.
absolutely, yeah, and a lot of the success most of the time came from some hardships. But one of the things that I will say is that my brother and I were never concerned with what someone else was doing, like competition, and you
Mm.
mentioned like being some of the biggest or not the biggest drug traffickers in a hub like Chicago.
Yeah.
That wasn't planned, and I never cared to have that title. We were just concerned with one thing. We got into business to make money, and we kept our eye on the prize. Um, we started off with 30 kilos, and before we were 18 years old, we already had millions of dollars, and
Are you gonna write a book on any of this? You gonna detail all this out? Because I mean,
yeah,
you'd almost have to. I can't do you justice on one podcast. And I don't know how long your seminars are, but I mean, this is like a wild life story. You'd have to write this out in like multiple novels.
You know what? There's a couple of different parts, but yeah, I do plan on mm, writing a book or a few books, right? Because there's two of us. You're hearing one side of it,
Mhm.
obviously, because of my brother. But uh, the hardest part has been that even sitting here talking to you, I know your background. I know, most of your audience. That's important to me that we're not here, trying to glamorize that life. That
Yeah.
I'm here as a guest. You know,
I would say it's definitely not about glamorizing. The biggest thing I think people don't understand, and this is both within law enforcement and outside, is especially doing work with informants, if you really get involved in that work, like you really get to know these people and you become I might have said this to you before, like anyone I've dealt with, I become the only normal thing in their life. Again, like the father figure, you're in and out of their life, or your father's in and out of your life, older brothers and stuff. But then they say one thing, they do another. You know, sometimes what they're doing is not right, but it's just like a lack of consistency. But then when I step in and I'm the consistent, I'm the reliable, and I start talking to people, and it's like, you call me at 2 in the morning, I'll answer most of the time. You call me any time of day. I'm there to listen to their problems. I'm there to help them. I don't know how many times I've coached people, like grown adults, right? In their 20s, in their 30s, how often I've coached them through life in general, dealing with kids, dealing with their girl, dealing with whatever it is that's coming at them. And once you start doing that, you build those relationships, and then people really are willing to tell you, the deepest, darkest secrets, just because you're willing to learn about them and listen to them. And it's not purely just to be like, oh, I got this info now, and I like run off and tell somebody that's going to do something with it. 99%, if people are wondering, 99.9% of source info pretty much goes nowhere because we just don't have the resources to deal with it. But um, you start to learn about them, and it's like reading a crazy book. It's like reading a really interesting story, and you're like, how did you get here? And like, if you put a lot of the effort that you're putting into staying alive half the time, you'd be super successful at a lot of other jobs, legitimate jobs. So just a little background for people listening.
and um, Nathan, like that's great observation. You hit it right on the head. And I think that even with working informants, the biggest thing I think that a lot of officers don't take in consideration is the human element of everything,
It gets lost. Yeah.
especially informant. A lot of times, I've been there, and I could speak a little bit about that, but I've been there where, you know, cognitive dissonance, right? That's what you call it, where you think you're a good person, you're doing wrong, and somehow in your mind, it's like, it's okay. I grew up with that mentality. I don't make excuses. I do. I will say that when my brother and I entered the drug trade, we knew 100% what we were doing.
Mhm.
Even at 17, we were mature 17 years old, right? We knew exactly what we were getting ourselves in. But maybe just having the opportunity or the necessity that I think that my father, what are some of his sins that he kind of put on us is that the worst thing you could be is poor. And us not wanting to wait and we're gonna ignore everything we knew. But the human element I think is important because later on when I'm gonna cooperate, it was hard because you're in this vulnerable setting where everyone is criminals, even your family. And I felt like the good in me, the one that was gonna do change, we look for, law enforcement to like be that people were it's like, oh, they're the only ones that know, and I could be myself. And sometimes you don't know many things, or and I gravitated to like having these people. I was like I was putting my life in their hands,
Yeah.
strangers.
Yeah. I heard that many times talking to people. They're like, if this gets out, I'm dead. You gotta like take it seriously.
It's like it's literal, and it's like I don't know. I mean, the best thing where I could describe it, and I'm not saying that like physically, but like maybe having like sexual relations with like you do that, and you might have like a close feel that closeness because, but that's how I felt like there's a closeness when we started like cooperating, and these are the only people that I felt like were could understand, and I started to like feel like they were my family.
Yeah.
And then, what was devastating to me that there would be certain moments where law enforcement, I seen the other side of them, where it's like, tell me what I need to know, and you're still a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And then I that used to kind of like affect me. And then to top it off, and just to make it clear, I mean, I have so many stories you could imagine.
Mhm.
Then I started meeting officers, really starting to get to know them, and start to be like, hmm, I'm the criminal.
Yeah.
Like, you have that kind of view because, it's easy. I don't have no excuses. I'm the criminal, but when it comes to law enforcement and some of their behavior, some of their actions, they, law enforcement take that oath to basically be the example. So
Yep.
you are put on a pedestal. And then it's like, you have a worse heart than me. Where we're at here, like, is
Yeah.
this a thin line?
It's we kind of call it like the gray zone when you look at this and you go, okay, like, what do I give compared to what do I get when I'm in this relationship? I'm talking to this person. You know, how do I get this information? And then how do I treat that person when I learn certain things? Right. I mean, like when we talk to informants, it's a lot of like, I don't want to know what you're doing. Tell me about the other side. It's because, if you tell me you're dealing drugs, like you're like, hey, I got this drugs right here, right now. It's like you're telling me about a crime, like I'm supposed to arrest you right now. So there's the
Yeah.
line, right? Like you got to know where that is.
It's one of my classes that I put together is like the handling informants, and the only reason why I'm able to say that, so just because I'm not gonna get into it really, but a lot of times they ask me about corruption,
Hmm.
and I want to make it clear, just like for me, and my brother, we felt like I didn't need anyone to help me in the U.S. in terms of law enforcement, like that. I rather them not know anything. There's not one thing that one officer could do for me, So, in Mexico, it was different. You get the right one, it's going to help you.
Hmm.
But we were victims of law enforcement corruption in the United States,
You're like, okay, okay.
and there's so many stories about that, so that we could get into. Where, and just to highlight it, is one of the stories is that my brother, first time getting kidnapped, he was actually kidnapped by a narcotics officer working with an informant.
Oh, really? Jeez.
And so I do have have these
Hmm.
different understanding of corruption and stuff like that because I witnessed it firsthand. I work hand in hand with the government cooperation and in terms of my case for 10 years, 11 years.
Well, what made you so? Yeah, so you start cooperating with the government. From that point on, though, like what makes you decide I want to help law enforcement? I want to do the education component. Did somebody talk you into that, or is that just something you're like, I already know all this? Like, would it be possible? Can I talk to you guys about that?
So a couple of things. I think what makes my brother and I unique is that besides that we're working with directly with the leaders of the Chapo Guzman and like Chapo Guzman and Mayo Zambada, like we had a relationship with them, and we're the first people that we taught their sons. We thought we had taught them, but it didn't work out that way. How to traffic drugs, and I believe that like we at that point, I think just understanding our family, was our kids were getting older, and I think naturally I felt like it was too late. There's many times in the time we were drug trafficking that I would ask myself like, what the hell did I do?
Yeah.
And it was getting to a point, where I would always pray, believe it or not, like, I want a life, I want out. If, I wish there was an answer. Like I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing because that's all I, know. But I went out, and I'll be honest with you, my way out was white sandy beaches, clear, blue water
Yeah.
somewhere, like, and somehow, somewhere, I'll be like, I'll get an answer until it kind of came to me that if I really wanted to change my life, that I was going to have to suffer the consequences. And I remember just even when the story goes, I have a podcast. So those who want to listen to my life a little bit, it's called Surviving the Chapo.
Yeah.
It's every podcast you could listen to it. It's hosted by 50 Cent, and I call it, later on, when people ask me about it, I call it like a spiritual epiphany where I had made a promise to my wife. And I woke up one day in the middle of the night, hit me like, if you really want to change your life, you could risk your life and cooperate.
Hmm.
And I remember waking my wife up in the middle of the night. I have a way out. It's 3, 4 in the morning. She's like, what are you talking? I have a way out. If I really want to change my life, I could reach out to the government and cooperate. And I believe I'll have a chance. And the first thing she told me was like, they'll kill you.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, like, I'm risking getting killed each and every day here for the last 10 years.
That is one way to look at it. You're like, well, what's different, right?
And that's what I said. So if my words to her were like, if I would rather risk my life doing something good for you and my children than just continue on this path.
Hmm.
That I would rather my kids know that I tried. And it was one of those emotional moments where my wife was like, that's what you should do then. And it took some convincing. It wasn't easy for me to tell my twin brother that. At the time, we were making anywhere from $4 to $12 million a month. On an average month, we're making $8, $9 million profits a month. We're in good situations. There's a lot of things that are starting to happen in that world. But it was our life. You hear stories of the government saying that we were threatened by 2 drug cartels at the same time that we were doing business with both of them, which is true. But that's their. To me, I always feel like law enforcement or the government doesn't want or didn't want to paint a pretty picture of us, and I get it.
Yeah.
Uh, But to me, my brother, reaching out to the government on our own and deciding to cooperate, like we're putting every criminal and every organization that we knew or in the world, basically making them our enemies,
Yeah.
and that's not like at that time it wasn't the smartest thing to do. But we did it, and we reached out to government and proactively started cooperating against the biggest jugglers in the world at that time, which was El Chapo Guzman, Maya Zambada, and Arturo Beltran Leyva, who many people don't know. He was a very large drug trafficker. At that time, he could have even been trafficking way more drugs than Chapo and Maya at the time.
Okay.
But he is now deceased. He was deceased in 2009. He was killed in a gun battle with the Mexican military. And yeah, it was one of those things where kind of we just jumped and took the plunge and hoped for the best. And we wanted to make sure that we stopped the cycle with our own family, right? With our own kids. And once we started cooperating, I started to kind of understand back then. I was scratching my head, because in my mind, I always felt like the government was like on our heels. And,
Surprised they're not. Yeah.
and and one way I would say that they had some information, but it took longer for us to convince them than anything. And once I started like, being involved in the investigation, being involved in those indictments and reports, I started to realize that many of the law enforcement officers that were involved in our cases nationwide were like, no.
Hmm.
Maybe that could have planted the seed.
I even say up here, like when we have investigations that go on, it's like part of when we say like we catch the stupid ones. That's true in a lot of ways. We catch people who just honestly they get lazy. Uh, they're sloppy with their work and stuff. Like, but to catch the true geniuses out there and like the ones who are under the radar, who don't go out and do all the violence in the public and all that stuff, it's like that. A lot of that, it's you're looking at like human intelligence, unless you're like high up government, you got some sort of signals intelligence. But for law enforcement, you have to rely on human informants because we can't keep up. Like when it comes to a lot of the legislation takes forever to change. Um, budgets, budget constraints are a huge problem. You know, even everything right down to like some of the narratives around DEI. And it affects like how we do business and who we talk to, how we talk to them, and all this stuff. Meanwhile, the criminals just keep going and doing whatever they want to do, right? They don't play by any rules. So all those things have an impact. So yeah, it definitely makes it harder. And it's funny because like I'll talk to some of the people on the other side of things, and they literally think we know everything. I'm like, what would make you even think that? It's like that's why I have to come into the club and ask you for your ID because I didn't know who you were. It's like it's basic things like that.
Yeah, that's a great thing to point out because to me, it's I ask this in all my seminars. Like, I want to see significant arrests or like seizures, and most of the time, because law enforcement thinks they know everything, what you're going to see is you're going to catch the ones that made a mistake,
Mm.
or you're going to catch the ones that are not so smart, right? And the reason why you have so significant drug trafficking operations is because they're good at what they do. Uh, there's no organization that wakes up one day and says, you know what, I'm going to send 800 kilos to Canada today. And it's how it goes. It happens because it's been consistent. It grew into that.
Yeah.
That means that they've been beating you for such a long time. And now it's like, you might get lucky. One might make a mistake. But it's that. It's the reason. This is why I started to do this. And, to me, in terms of narcotics, in terms of like, I even think even patrol community, based policing, the biggest tool that you have, your biggest weapon in your arsenal is informant.
Yeah.
It's not a gun. And let's be honest, God, I hope that and pray that any law enforcement listening to that, they don't have to use their weapon. Chances are, if I look at percentages, you won't.
Yep.
But guess what? You go to the range, 20 times a month. Might use that as an excuse to get away from the wife, whatever it is you do, but you're practicing for that, right? But yet, many people don't know how to use informant. They don't know what it is like to handle one, to understand what they go through, to kind of like figure out what they might be facing once they started to be informant. Because a lot of times when some of these informants, some of these cooperators, when you arrest them, and the ones that shouldn't be in those situations, the one thing they don't want to do is go to prison.
Yeah.
To them, it's like death. And to avoid death, they're willing to, who knows, do anything. And sometimes that comes with putting themselves in danger they don't see because they're not able to understand that, right? Visualize that or even comprehend that might be doing something that could put their life or their family life in danger. And that's where like the officer comes in and they have to be, they have to understand more than the person cooperating. And if you don't, it could lead to disaster.
You know what? That's an interesting. There might be a bit of a dichotomy here with between the U.S. and Canada, because in Canada we don't give very long sentences, and they're not back to back. Like we don't stack them. So like we have people up here that do murder and get less than double digits in years for time. Constantly, the bad guys tell us, like, I don't care. Like, I don't think about you when I'm going out and doing what I'm doing. Like, you don't scare me in the sense of like, I'm not worried about going to jail because you got to catch me. You got to find all the evidence. My lawyer's going to get half that evidence tossed out because you didn't like cross one T or dot one I on some form. You probably breached my charter rights in some way. And then it's still got to get to a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. So the biggest thing, like at least up here, we have is it is a lot of relationship building, and it's not even just from the one-off arrests. It is like a thing over time. It's like one thing we were doing with the gang unit is like we see people on a frequent basis, right? And you're constantly talking to them, and it kind of goes back to what you're saying, like uh, you know, you could go and train on your firearm all the time, but most of the places that we put ourselves in and where we're going, we're outmanned, outgunned. Like the only thing I have is my mouth, and it's going to get me into trouble or get me out. Yeah. So,
In Mexico, they have this saying like know, the right words will make you a friend, or the wrong words will make you enemy, right?
mhm, very true.
They apply, but yeah, I think you know, you talk about some of the legislation, and here's what I believe: it's always late. I sat down with many legislators and congressmen, senators, and community-based leaders that were pampered as young adults or went to the military, but don't know or understand anything about the criminal element or don't get drug trafficking. And then they put policies in place and stuff like that that don't go hand in hand with something that could be helpful to you on the field. So, like, I believe, like, I don't know the history. I'm just going to guess that with Canada, these laws are based on old type of laws, old type of fashion. Let's be honest, like, you guys were not experiencing any real violent crimes and stuff like that for
Yeah.
any legislation to be changed. But the last 15, 20 years, it's only going to get worse.
Mhm.
And you anticipate this by saying, you know what, we're going to crack down, we're going to stop. Because I think I've seen some of your numbers on violent crimes have increased once dramatically.
Yeah. Gun crime is up. Violence is up. Yeah.
Gun crime, drug use comes with drug use.
Mhm.
Now you got gun violence, murder. It's all increasing. Only continue to increase. If there's those legislation, those laws don't change.
Mhm.
Why wait for it? You know?
Maybe one of my biggest critiques, and it shouldn't get me in any trouble, but my one of my biggest critiques is when the leadership goes on the news and says things to the effect of like to the bad guys, it's like, we're gonna find you. Like you can't hide anywhere and all those lines. And I'm just like, oh my God, maybe that sounds good to some naive person out in the public. But I'm like, the criminals are literally laughing at you. I would literally get text messages, phone calls from informants because they watch the news too. They're learning, they're paying attention. And they would watch it and then they would message me or call and they'd be like, did that guy actually just say that? He's like, you know how much is going on out there? And like, you guys don't get it. So, like, that stuff is, yeah.
What's weird is that, I keep up with the news all the time. And for sure, I always kept up with the news. As a matter of fact, I will tell you this. Before, that's where we got our information from, was from the news, right? They're
Hmm.
gonna give you information, like just like anyone else, We now, like, especially with social media, especially with the internet and the way it is, like all my news, I'm keeping up with it, drug seizures across the US in the borders or whatever, seeing trends, stuff like that. They're gonna do the same thing. But one of the things in prison, the most important channels on in the compounds where people are going to be the news channels. Like, you don't mess with it. You're going to have one, you know, right wing, and that's what they do, is watch the news. That's where they get their information. But one of these is just like, I look at a city like Chicago, right, where the laws, federal laws and stuff like that. I see people every day killing each other and the violence and stuff like that, and it's going to get to a point where people be like, yeah, the laws don't, look, the laws don't help over there.
Hmm.
But here's where I believe is that it has to be a unity of federal government, state government, local government, for all of them to feel the same way. And I will tell you something. If you go back to the 90s, people say when we started the war on drugs, um, it made an impact in the community. And I believe, like, no, violent crime, going after the violent crime, those gun charges made an impact. Because
Okay.
who's holding guns?
Yeah.
Most of the people who are holding guns are going to be like, oh no, they're protecting themselves, but it's also going to be those violent people that want to use their guns.
Yeah.
You start adding those, they start putting those laws into place and started really giving harsh times, and violence was going to start to decrease. It's decreased compared to the 90s, per se. But um, it takes for law enforcement to have the weapon of the criminals to be fearful. Because if they're not, then they're going to continue doing what they want, and that kind
Yeah.
of puts other people actually that maybe shouldn't have no involvement in criminal activity to get into it as well.
Hmm.
Because everyone outweighs their what they're looking at. Like especially in drug trafficking. Like, okay, well, if I do this, it carries this amount of sentences, and then I could probably do this long. Is it worth it to me?
Yeah. Yeah. On the chance like I was saying earlier, I'm detailing out that thing, and it's like so many things have to happen before a conviction in court. And then up here, it's like if you get convicted, the chances of you doing like a significant amount of time is very low. And you do need the political will. Something I kind of go on about on social media, but you need the political will and the fortitude. And you need that alignment right across all levels, like right from the municipal too. Sometimes I think they think it's not their job at the city level. You're like, you can still support the police in a lot of ways, but you need that alignment right through to the feds. Make the laws, hold them accountable, because that helps us on the back end of things. But then on the front end, support us when we do the proactive policing and we go out there and are talking to people and following where the trends go, where the calls take us, where the intelligence puts us, because that's who we have to engage with, right? So we're trying to stop the violence.
Yeah, for sure. And it also is like sometimes, especially for me, I'm always like, before you vote on something, you need to understand it and know like what you're doing or some of the policies are putting into place. So even, when it comes to the US government, like I sat down with legislators, I'm like, no wonder why we're in this situation.
Hmm.
You think you know something, you have no idea you're putting resources, you're allocating resources to the wrong things.
Yeah.
And then you're voting on the wrong policies and laws that you think are going to change something. And I know that right now it's going to be a touchy subject,
Hmm.
especially Donald Trump
Yeah.
and his administration. But I will tell you something. Like if you're in law enforcement anywhere, you know, one thing you could be proud of that someone's not carrying. And if there's some other like you know, reasons or whatever the case is, one thing for sure is that someone came in and said, look, we're gonna start putting pressure on everyone, to go after drug trafficking, go after criminals, right? Uh and to many it could be like too much. But I will tell you, like, being in, having that medium was great.
Mhm.
But I would say I'd rather be on this side because me coming with my experience as being involved with drug trafficking and as a criminal, that finally someone's going to put a little halt to it because some of these, FTO, the organization especially, to some of these traffickers,
You're talking the foreign terrorist organization
yeah,
designations. Yeah.
that's going to really affect them. It's
Hmm.
different when you think that you're going to get away with it, but now even anyone, right, that's tied to that could be a material porter or supplier or whatever.
Yeah,
So,
you're aiding or abetting. So Canada did that too. So we followed suit with some of that, and I think that's where we could make a difference. But also, one of the problems that we have here is we don't have a lot of the specialists required to go after certain types of laws, if we even have those laws on the books. Like the US has been through so much, and they've got a lot of different ways they can go after people. We don't have RICO up here. We have different disclosure requirements. So we're behind on a lot of that, and we do need to make quite a few changes.
Nate, I was gonna talk about that
Mhm.
right now. So for any legislator, hopefully they'll listen to your podcast or any lawmakers. Um, this is what's ironic to me. I feel like my brother and I became successful because we learned from everyone else's mistakes. We had so many stories as kids, from
Yeah.
Mexico, from brother suppliers, and yet here you are. You're, the neighbor to the north. Firsthand experience. Look at what happened to the United States in the last 40 years, to learn from the mistakes, to learn what worked. And the fact that there's no more emphasis putting in it on saying, hey, you know what? maybe we should grab some of these, like people who are like leaving office or that we're doing lots of uh, great things and
Yeah.
come advise us, right, on what to do. How should we look at? How could we establish RICO? How could we, like, uh, how do we focus on investigations? Because one of the things I, talked to Congress about, and I'll never forget this question. I had expressed some ideas, and Congress told me, and the committee told me was if if it would be so effective, why is it not any other country doing it or something like that?
Okay.
And I remember saying to this, I was saying to them, you know what, sir? The whole world looks at the United States for, as the example,
Yeah.
because we're the ones that have been dealing with this issue more than any other country in the world.
Yeah.
So if the United States is not doing it, don't expect another country to do it.
Yeah. You're the leaders in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Because, it's, the United States has been affected by it. Like, I'm just not only, but I'm just saying, but there have been the market,
Yeah.
and the most known. So, like, as you see it because of the internet, because of widespread drug use around the world, now you see countries that you probably never even consider. For instance, like Canada. For those people who live in Canada, think that we know that it didn't happen yesterday. We know it's been there forever.
Hmm.
It's now becoming more and more profound, probably more available, like drugs becoming more available. But now you have countries in Africa,
People don't realize how intertwined this world is.
and everyone's like in and out. And I really think it has a lot to do with, you know, to me, it's like the internet. Maybe like people want to try drugs, and you start seeing all these like ecstasy. I think kind of propelled it, where
Hmm.
you know everyone wants to like ecstasy, and I think like music and the culture of party and all that kind of goes in hand, and that's like one environment. It just kind of starts
Yeah.
to like snowball. But yeah, I would look at go back and I think look at some of the policies that weren't they didn't work for the United States, and then look at some that do.
Hmm.
Uh, now I also think that a lot of times government doesn't want to imprison people, don't want to waste the money.
Yeah. And I don't like, I think it might on that actually. That's an interesting one. And I don't know how deep we can get into it with time left, but I up here, like we are, all the prisons are run by the government. I don't know of any private prisons, but in the US, they can be private.
Hmm.
So there is like a way to make money off of that, is there not? Because up here, all I've ever heard is, again, it comes back to the whole DEI type stuff. It's just like we have too many of whatever group in prison. So they literally, and this is right from uh, Crowns, like that's our, what you call them, the DAs down there, like from the attorneys, from parole, like they all say like chain of command, the bosses, whoever, they don't want whatever group in there. They don't want whatever person going to jail, or this is going to get tossed just because the judge is this color or race or whatever, and the defendant's that. They're probably just going to let him go anyways. I've heard that so many times.
Basically, yeah, you start to reverse profile, and you don't want to look like you're that. And to me, I'm just like coming from a criminal, like, I don't care what race you are, who you are. You're a criminal, you're a criminal. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you start focusing on that, again, criminals are going to exploit that. They're going to take advantage of that.
Yep.
And here in the United States, you hear that a lot, that there's all these private prisons, and you hear some of these judges, getting paid off, and they put people in prison and stuff like that. You know what? Um, I never really thought about that, gave my point, but maybe there shouldn't be, but I think there just has to be better policing.
Hmm.
But like right now, if you kept up, is that the Trump administration exported some of their prisoners to El Salvador
Yeah, I
because it's
saw.
cheaper. I'm like, wow, that's a different idea. Like it's a different idea. A lot of
Yeah.
these, prisoners are not American, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then you have those people that can be like, oh, what about their rights? What about like it's kind of ironic. Like, you want America, for instance, I'm talking about from America. You want America to be safe. You want America to prosper, but yet you don't want like you want to just kind of like cater to criminals and cater to everyone that comes into the country. I look at like, look, if they're not, Americans, then that should be one of the tools. Like you're not
Yeah.
going to do your prison. You're not going to get the advantages that you'd get in the United States,
Yep.
and you could do your uh, prison sentence in El Salvador. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, for the last group of people, I think, don't I mean, I could be wrong. I think it was like $6 million. I think for the a year for like the 300 to whatever whoever they sent
Hmm.
to house. And I think that it would take like it would cost the United States like 40 something $1 million, to house them
Yeah.
here in the US.
You're like, wow, I just trimmed that bill real quick.
Yeah, you imagine you just take that. And I would tell you something too, in prison. Prison's hard, but I would look at it like we could complain, but prison shouldn't be a nice state. It should be a deterrent. It shouldn't be like, oh, I had an easy, time. And I will tell you, like, one of the biggest things that Mexican cartel leaders, drug traffickers fear the most is being facing American prison, facing American law.
Yeah.
Because they
Yeah.
could get away with in other countries. And a great example is like look at Pablo Escobar and his reign. Like everything we know about Pablo Escobar was his battle against not wanting there to be a extradition treaty with the United States.
Yeah.
That's how important it was to him, where he was killing innocent people, blowing up planes, killing judges and cops, and because those laws, those prisons do work
Yeah.
if they're used.
Yeah. And just as I got maybe like 10 more minutes with you here because I want to keep you all day. We got to do like a part 2 for sure. But I do want to just ask, like, maybe on a lighter note,
Yeah.
because most of the stuff we've been talking about here is pretty heavy. Um, just in your bio, I was saying that like you do some of the consulting with Hollywood and media and talk about proper portrayals of the stuff. And we kind of hit on this a bit earlier about not glamorizing stuff. So I'm wondering, like, what does that work look like? Or what have you been doing in that realm? And what have you found? Like, has it worked? Do people start to understand things?
Okay, that's something great, and I think it's important, especially what's going on with politics now. My biggest thing is if you don't understand your enemy, you don't know who they are. How are you supposed to like really have an impact? And the biggest thing is that you're going to see it. I have a headline today where it's like, um, law enforcement targeting a Sinaloa transnational, drug cartel
Okay.
raid results in a law enforcement, being killed.
Hmm.
And those are the headlines, and you look, and it's like it's terrible. It's sad. That a law enforcement could lose their lives, but the person that was killed himself was a white Caucasian 60-year-old meth dealer.
Oh, okay.
And some of the things that the reason why I'm like I don't know if this is what well my question started off like, do I know, is this what really law enforcement thinks, is this what politicians thinks, that there's a bunch of Sinaloa cartel members just running Mexico, running Canada,
Yeah.
and if that's what they think, and just say if the Canadian government decides to crack down on drug trafficking, are they really looking for Mexicans to be running, their operations out of one of these cities? And that started to worry me, because sometimes many law enforcement officers or even politicians don't want to hear that the people that run these operations, the people that you know have a that control drug trafficking, are not Mexican.
Yeah. Well, it's your own citizens, and it can be anything. It can be
It's
anybody.
your own. Most of the time, it's your own citizens. And here, for example, in Canada, like if you're looking for Mexicans, you're gonna find some working that they're gonna pick up to work and do something. But the people running that are gonna be the same organization that's been involved in Canada forever. It's gonna be your Italian mafia,
Mhm.
your Chinese triad, right? They're the ones that run your motorcycle gang. They're the ones that are going to run your drug trafficking operations, and the biggest thing is going to be connections. That they have connections that Mexican drug cartels are supplying them. Absolutely, but you're not going to see a Mexican drug cartel go to Canada, set up, and say, you know what, I want to start distributing drugs. Those are linked to Canadian uh, based organization, and I think
Mhm.
that there's a big difference there because you might be overlooking who are the actual distributors, who are the people who transport, who are the people that you should actually be targeting, and, and to me that's important because me being American, being overlooked.
Yeah.
I don't fit that Mexican profile where it's like they're expecting to have a Mexican drug cartel be running operation. I always say, look, I was American first. I was American made. Before I stepped foot into Mexico or became part of the Sinaloa cartel, I was already selling 2,000 to 2,500 kilos of cocaine a month in Chicago and distributing across the United States and into Canada. Um, and it's most of these operations are ran by Americans. In places like if you go to Humboldt County, they're going to be ran by Americans. They're going to be ran, different gangs or organizations are going to be running these drug trafficking organizations and supplying, you know, drugs. And it's not that I'm trying to protect Mexican drug cartels. I'm just trying to really, really get to the answer to be like, if this is what you're actually looking for, then this is why you're not making substantial seizures or arrests.
Yeah. You're 100% on point. Like, I mean, we've had Canadians getting busted for all kinds of things. The snowboarder there, he's wanted right now. People are just like, "How is a snowboarder involved in this? How are they not?" Like, it's funny, like, a lot of say, the higher up, uh, drug dealers that we have around the city that we talk to, um, even to us, they'll just be like, "Wow, I'm not doing anything. I work here 8 to 4, and I do this, and I own this business and stuff." I'm like, "That's nice. You're not doing anything at the business. You're just selling drugs from there all day, and then all night you're doing out doing meetings and stuff." Like, just because on paper you have some job and you put on a facade, uh, like, I know the truth about you. I know the public doesn't. They think I'm just picking on you for whatever reason,
Yeah.
but it's like, but I know everything about you. So
Wedding, right? The
Ryan
snowboarder, his
Wedding,
name is
yeah, Ryan Wedding.
Ben Wedding. Yeah. I'll tell you something, like, those are the people to me, like, you see headlines, they're surprised. This is a snowboarder, Canadian snowboarder, right? And it's like, it's weird because a lot going back to the media, like, the media portrays what it should look like. Honestly, if it was another Mexican running in, you'd be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
yeah," but to me, it's like, who did you expect? I've dealt with Canadian, organizations, and you're gonna have Asians, you're gonna have French Canadians, you're gonna have, you know, Middle Eastern people that
Yeah.
control parts of the drug trade, and those are gonna be the people that run those organizations and no like anywhere else, and that's important to me. It's not because like I'm Mexican and we want that to change. I just think like the reason why those are highlights is because this is what law enforcement thinks. This is what
Mhm.
you know. This is what in their mind, and just because I speak to someone, and I always say like, look, if you're expecting, that you're gonna like go into a house and find the Sinaloa cartel working like that's a mistake. It's most of the time it's ran by like American organization,
Yeah.
they're working but no one's gonna control a street or a gang. And one of the examples, especially when you hear about these criminal gangs, like, I always say, well, you show me one neighborhood, you show me one city that the Sinaloa cartel actually runs a neighborhood block or a distribution place.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for answer. No one can show me. The same thing. I doubt that you're going to see, you know, an American, you know, organization, a criminal organization, go to a street and go into a neighborhood in Toronto and say, "Look, I'm gonna just take it over.
Mhm.
This is gonna be my," like without you hearing about it, without there being violence or
And they would rather be in the kinda in the shadows, right? Or be distant from it, right? Sell the stuff, get it over there, like, do the logistics, and then you distribute it because, 99 out of 100 times, that's who's gonna get caught is the one standing at the street corner holding the stuff. So, yeah, no,
it,
that
it
makes sense.
works as customers. It's like a customer based thing. And it just even like so I could point out Hollywood, right? A lot of times, law enforcement gets a lot of their knowledge through Narcos and Netflix. One of the things I will point out, I always talk about Ozark.
Yeah.
Um, like you look at something like Ozark. Have you
Yeah.
watched this?
Seen Ozark.
Okay, so it's funny because they took some of like the beginnings of it, from our story, right? Chicago,
Yeah.
drug distribution, money laundering,
Yeah.
and I was offended, a little bit because I'm like, damn, why couldn't the good guys be Hispanic or Mexican? Why did the good guys have to be Caucasian?
They end up being all the bad guys.
The bad guys are gonna be the right,
Yeah.
like the bad guys are gonna be the Mexican. They're gonna force the good guys, force a Caucasian family into money laundering, because you're gonna like, the basis of the show is that they're always being threatened with death and they're doing it to save their family.
Hmm.
And I'm gonna tell you, I don't care what race you are, what country you are. One thing drives anyone to get into drug trade. It's gonna be the financial gain.
Yeah.
There is Caucasians, there's French Canadians, there's white people, black people. It doesn't matter. Asians. It doesn't matter that are into the drug trade because it's a risk that they're willing to take because the financial gain of it,
Hmm.
right? And that's why I felt like, well, if you're going to start basing so much movies off of Hollywood and you're selling this, you might as well have the real clear picture because it transcends sense, right?
Yeah.
Where the Mexicans are going to be the violent people with the machetes and with the AKs.
Yeah.
But in reality, what you see in the media and social media, like those people out there that like they're violent, they are the ones that are killing themselves, basically work lower level people.
Mm.
The ones that are important are the ones that you don't hear about. That when they make an arrest, you're like, that was him.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't look like the guy expected to look at. Like look like so. You see it right now. Even a couple like months ago, what there was a uh, European, right? European drug lord that was killed in Mexico.
Oh yeah.
Who who was actually, and it's like it makes the news like, oh my god, I'm like, yeah, it's a business,
Mm.
you know, all kinds, and they're going to be involved in. And of course, this is like the short version of it because there's so many things I could kind of get into, but um, I'm all about just, I think I'm a great example. Well, first of all, you know, being that I was American, being that I speak English, being that I was involved in, you know, the highest levels of Mexican drug cartels and drug trafficking. And be the fact that I voluntarily turn myself in, serve my prison sentence, and my will of really trying to make a difference. I think, it's who I am. It's who I've always been. And to me, I feel like part of redemption is doing the work. And I feel like I had done so much wrong in my life. And I feel like I could gave back and left a positive legacy. But more importantly, I see that me growing up and I see the culture today everywhere, all across the world. It's the picture of the life is sold like in a movie like Scarface
Yeah.
or in all the movies. And I would tell you something like I climbed that mountain. It wasn't worth it.
Mm.
I'm one of those persons that live to speak about it and and share some of that information that there's no money in the world that that would be worth it. And I'm one of the lucky few that was able to overcome it. And I feel like I have a lot of knowledge and that I could share to make a difference. Not just for law enforcement, but also as like hopefully make someone think twice about the life or, you know, prevent someone from entering it or just give hope that someone that's actually participating in any criminal activity could, you know, change their life and do something positive.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's a good place to wrap it up. Just I think we covered a lot of ground there. I could ask questions for hours. um, we'll definitely have to do it again. I just want to make sure you give people the opportunity to find you and follow you. So
So
you got your website and social media. Where can they get in touch?
First of all, I just want to thank you for having me and for reaching out. I'll do
Yeah.
this again. There's so many things we have to cover, right?
Yeah.
Probably talk about this for hours, but I appreciate the opportunity. And I have a website, um, www.kingpin2educator.com. Kingpin to educator, TO educator. Um, and I have all the information there where you could get a hold of me. I'm on LinkedIn as my name, Margarito Flores, um, and under Kingpin to educator as well. Um, and I'm hoping that sooner or later I'll be able to give some of my seminars that I'm actually promoting now. I have a few different ones, but the one I actually give a lot is called "Surviving the Chapo." It's a 2-day seminar, and we basically cover like a bunch of different subjects in distribution and major cartel operations and logistics, as well as working with informants, counter surveillance, compartments, and that sort. That I give them. I actually give them all across the country here in the U.S. I haven't been to Canada yet. I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, if anyone's interested, you could go onto my website. You'll get more information there. I have a email address on there as well. But I'll give it to you. It's info at kingpin2educator.com.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you so much for having me. If there's anything else I could do, just let me know.
Awesome. Well, hang on the line for 2 seconds. I'll chat with you real quick offline. But yeah, I really appreciate it. And this will be very informative for listeners up here. And again, I'll help out where I can. So just hang there. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening in and following along with the discussions. Be sure to click the follow or subscribe button on your respective listening platform. Also, check out the Quiet Professional on X and Instagram under TQP780. And most importantly, please share where you can. Everyone has a part to play in getting these education and information pieces out there, so pass it along. Thanks again.